The name Maroon comes from the Spanish word cimarron, meaning wild or untamed. When the British invaded the island in 1655, the African slaves of the Spanish colonists escaped into the hills in order to live a free life. Some of them helped their former masters in guerrilla warfare against the British. One such was Juan de Bolas, whose subsequent defection to the British side hastened the final exodus of the Spaniards.
Teach them! Always make sure the message reach them!
In time, the Maroons came to control large areas of the interior and would swoop down from the hills to raid the plantations. Runaway slaves also found a refuge with them. The two main groups were the Trelawney Town Maroons, led by Cudjoe, and the Windward Maroons, led by Nanny and later by Quaho. The Maroons were skilled hunters and fierce fighters, and the British Army and local militia were unable to control or conclusively defeat them. Indian hunters and their dogs had to be imported from Central America to track them in the bushes. The First Maroon War ended with a treaty and ceded large areas of land to the Maroons. In turn, they had to promise to recapture and return all runaway slaves and help the government in the event of an invasion. The land ceded to the Maroons was around Flagstaff in Trelawney and was named Trelawney Town and at a compound in St. Elizabeth. A compound remains Maroon territory to this day, but after the Second Maroon War, the Trelawney Town land was taken away and most of the male Maroons exiled to Nova Scotia and Canada and then to Africa. The remnants of their families settled nearby in districts now known as Maroon Town. The land given to the Windward Maroons was around Moortown and Charlestown in Portland, and also Scotsall in St. Mary. Maroon land is held in common and they are not required to pay taxes. There are 5 Maroon settlements still active in Jamaica, with the most popular one being Accompong in St. Elizabeth. Accompong was formed after the Maroons signed a peace treaty with the British in 1739. It is listed as one of the 2 areas where runaway slaves settled. The area was isolated enough to be saved, first from the Spanish and then later from the British. The treaty granted the Maroons their long sought after autonomy. However, when the Second Maroon War broke out in 1795, the Accompong Maroons remained neutral and the British left them alone. At the end of the war, all the other Maroon settlements in Jamaica were destroyed. Accompong alone remained. The town of Accompong was named after the Maroon leader Accompong, who was from an Ashanti family and was the brother of a number of other Maroon leaders, including Quaho, Coffee, Cudjoe, and Nanny. Cudjoe is credited for uniting the Maroons in their fight for autonomy. Descendants and friends of the Maroons come together in celebration of the treaty on January 6 each year, which is also Cudjoe's birthday. Up next is Charlestown in Portland. Initially, the Charlestown Maroons had settled in Crawford Town, high in the Blue Mountains, before signing the peace treaty with the British. After the treaty, they moved down to Charlestown and created a quiet hamlet about 2 miles north of Buff Bay. The town rests on just 1,000 acres of Maroon community land, which is governed by the Maroon Council. Most of the families there can trace their ancestry back to the original Maroons, who were led by Nanny's captain Quaho. Up until his death in August 2015, Charlestown was under the leadership of Colonel Frank Lumsden, who was born in 1942 in Buff Bay, not far from the historic village. Lumsden and his brother Keith are credited with reviving the town, which had been in decline for years. After studying and working in the United States for many years, he returned to Jamaica in 1998 and joined Keith, who had already formed a council of elders and revived the Maroon heritage. Their great-grandaunt, Justina Tun-Tun Campbell, a former chieftainess and herbal healer, joined the brothers on the council, which was registered in 2003 as a corporation. Next is Flagstaff in St. James. High in the hills of the St. James section of the Cockpit Country, at the end of a long winding mountain road, there is a district called Flagstaff. It is part of the region extending all the way to North St. Elizabeth that used to be called Trelawney Town. Many decades ago, the residents were all Maroons who valiantly defied British colonizers and were subsequently left alone to carry on their lives in that rocky place. As time passed, other people moved in. The culture and population became diverse. Some descendants and offspring moved out of the region and the Maroon culture became diluted. This basically is the story of all the Maroon villages in Jamaica. But while districts such as Accompong Town in St. Elizabeth, Charlestown and Moortown in Portland, and Scotsall in St. Mary have gotten much local and international publicity, St. James, Moortown and Flagstaff seem to be the forgotten places in the annals of Maroon history. Flagstaff features considerably in the Maroon War, which began in 1795. After that war, barracks were built in the old town, now known as Flagstaff. By 1838, 59 buildings were occupying this site. Next on the list of Maroon settlement is Moortown, located in Portland. Hilly and rugged, Moortown sits in the heart of Portland's Maroon country. Like a compound, it was formed in 1793 when Kodjo signed a peace treaty with the British. Nanny refused to sign a treaty with the British, but eventually agreed to a truce. At first, the Maroons were given 500 acres of land after the signing of the treaty. Nanny realized that this allotment was not enough for their needs and made a request to the British government in 1781. They were granted a further 1,270 acres, which was called Maroon. Due to a misunderstanding and errors, the name was recorded in the survey document as Muirtown and later Moortown. Maroons also live in the neighboring Cornwall barracks. Nanny's Maroon divided themselves into two groups, one of which went with her brother Quaho to Crawford Town and the other followed her to the new settlement, Nannytown, now called Moortown. The site of the former town is on Nannytown Hill, some 200 feet above sea level. Nannytown is said to have had more than 140 houses in its heyday, many of which were burnt by the militia but rebuilt by Maroons during the 4 years of fighting which preceded the treaty. Built around 1723, it was not discovered by the English until 1728 when Sambo, an African, led them to it. Nannytown was repeatedly attacked by British troops in 1730, 1731, 1732 and several times in 1734. Moortown's main site of interest is Bump Grave, an oblong stone and plaque that marks the gravesite of Nanny. Closing out the list of Maroon settlements in Jamaica is Scots Hall in St. Mary. Scots Hall is the principal home of the St. Mary Maroons. It was established after the First Maroon War ended, around the same time as Moortown in 1793. The Scots Hall Maroons celebrate the signing of their peace treaty with the British on August 1, which is the same as Emancipation Day. Scots Hall is today a subsistence farming community where many medicinal herbs and other plants can be found. It is one of the lesser known Maroon settlements and seems to have been forgotten by most Jamaicans. However, with support from various agencies, the leaders will be embarking on developing a more sustainable agricultural program, which includes production of breadfruit, red peas, vegetables, bananas and yam. The town is now under the leadership of Colonel Rudolph Pink.
Teach them! Hey, yo, hello! Send the message and make it reach them. Teach them. Right here, Warlord representing.
Thank you for watching. Please leave a comment below. Remember to like and share the video. Don't forget to subscribe for more awesome content. Follow me on social media and check out the suggested videos on screen. This is Teach saying, until next time, walk good, my friends.